Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we are going to be talking about creepy encounters. So, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true scary stories. My husband and I own a couple of houses that we rent out. We keep a separate mobile phone to contact tenants. They don't have our regular phone numbers. One day we got a call from this phone from a tenant asking why we had called him the previous evening. He hadn't answered the call, just noticed it later. We denied calling. We had no reason to, and in fact hadn't called him for many months. After the conversation, we looked at the phone. And sure enough, there was an outgoing call listed at around 11:30 p.m. the previous evening. The spooky thing is that we both had been asleep upstairs at that time, and this tenant's phone had been on the coffee table the whole night. Nobody else lives in our house. I've tried and tried, but I cannot come up with an explanation for this. I went to a club with some friends, and me and a girl walked away from the group to get another drink. She decided she needed to go to the bathroom and left me to wait by the bar because there were a lot of people waiting and it was a small venue. It was also a relatively nice club and a casino, so I didn't expect anything bad to happen. When she walked away, this old creep who was wearing a grimy t-shirt and slurring his words started trying to talk to me. I lied, saying that I have a boyfriend, and tried to text my friends, but for some reason my cellular had gotten turned off, and no one could see my texts. He was saying if my boyfriend loved me that he would be here, and other things along those lines. I looked at my phone, texting my friends, hoping a message would go through, trying to ignore him. He reached his hand to his side and started groping me, grabbing my thigh and stuff. I was slightly drunk and stupid, and I just froze. I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. Looking back, I wish I had told him off, kicked him, grabbed his drink and spilled it in his face. If not that, I should have just walked away and went to my friends, but I didn't do anything. Why didn't I do anything? This wasn't the first or last experience I had being uncomfortable in public due to a pervy older guy. Somehow, the memory of this is disgusting. Intoxicated middle-aged man still haunts me. If someone gropes me in the future, what will I do? I hope next time I tell them off, but will I? Probably not. What if they get mad and aggressive? The anxiety of confrontation is almost worse than bottling the anger and guilt up. So what do I do now to avoid the anxiety of some creep assaulting me? I simply don't go out. I prefer to stay away from crowded places where R-wordists and perverted people thrive. A club is not a place to have fun. It's a place where a target is placed on the backs of anyone naive. A place where anyone and everyone can easily become a victim. Stay safe out there. Me and my boyfriend are a little creeped out. We just moved into a different neighborhood on the south side of our city. The houses are more crowded together, but the area is nice. I was watching TV in our living room when my boyfriend noticed a vehicle parked in front of his, facing it. Mind you, this road is a huge busy neighbor road with an elementary school at the corner. On any normal road, you are supposed to park with the passenger side to the curb. A vehicle that was parked out of the ordinary. left side. So close to his on an empty road made me want to confront them. We don't know how long they were there, but they were in a rusty, dusty blue pickup truck. It was about 5 minutes after we noticed that they pulled off slowly, like they were looking at the car. My boyfriend thinks that they may have air tagged it to steal it later or do something else. This is because I had returned home within 30 minutes of this occurrence. I digress, but it's a 2013 Kia. I'm not entirely sure what to think of this. I'd like to think they were looking at their phone, but why not park on the correct side of the street? And why did they pull up so close to his car? What do you think of this? Maybe it was nothing. Content warning. SA. About 2 years ago, a group of my friends went out to a concert. We had a good time, plenty to drink, and the concert had ended, and we were outside trying to figure out a place to cure our drunkenness. We were standing in a circle on the sidewalk, and our friend group consisted of 7 guys and 1 girl. Some random guy comes up and stands way too close to the girl in our group. We don't know what he was doing, and it was very odd. All 7 of us guys stared at him like, "What are you doing?" He noticed us staring at him and silently left. Our friend, Lexi, had a disgusted look on her face and told us that he was standing so close that she could feel his excitement on her leg. As he gets further up the street, we see him approach another woman who ignores him and keeps going her way. He then turns around and starts coming back to where we are and walks past us, staring at our friend Lexi, and we tell him to keep it moving, creep. About 2 minutes later, we hear a woman screaming, and our whole group starts sprinting towards the screams. He's fully on top of a woman, and there is a guy laying on the ground next to the woman screaming. My friend jumps on his back and gets him in a headlock and starts pulling him off the woman. I was fuming with anger and disgust, and just started punching the guy in the face multiple times, while my friend had him in a headlock. At this point, the guy is basically unconscious, so we stop and leave him there lying there on the concrete. The guy who was laying on the concrete next to the woman being assaulted then wakes up and comes over and kicks the creeper in the face very hard. Apparently, the creeper came up to this guy and woman and started trying to touch the woman and saying that he wants to F her. Well, the guy and the woman were boyfriend and girlfriend, so obviously the guy was pissed. But they were out celebrating his birthday, and he was super drunk and unable to defend himself. The creeper punched the guy in the face and knocked him out, and had taken the woman to ground and began assaulting her, which is when we showed up. I'm just thankful that we were around and showed up quickly, as it could have been so much worse. I normally don't condone violence at all, but sometimes it's the only option. I went to the grocery store early one morning. When I was checking out, there was an elderly gentleman in front of me. He was wearing a veteran's hat. He started making casual conversation with me about prices, and how when he was young, like me, the prices were super low. He was much older, so people around him, the cashier and some other gentlemen, helped him bag his groceries. He didn't have much, but it was hard for him to keep his balance. He almost fell at one point, held onto my arm and apologized to me for doing so. I told him that it was okay and to have a great day. I also didn't have many things, so I began to walk out of the store and eventually caught up to him, as he could not walk very fast. I asked him if he wanted me to walk him to his car, and he told me that he had rode his bike because he was forced to turn in his driver's license due to his age. I was impressed that he had rode a bike and asked him where he lived. He told me he lived about 15 minutes bike distance. I asked him if he wanted a ride. He was elderly and didn't seem like a threat, He accepted, so I popped my trunk open so that he could put his bike in. We were struggling when another man who was about to walk into the store saw and helped us. He thanked the elderly man for his service and proceeded to go inside. On the way, he asked if we could stop by Carl's Jr. to get a new combo that his wife saw on TV, and had asked him to bring her back one. He called his wife and asked her what the name of the combo was. Once we got to the drive-thru, we ordered and I offered to pay. He thanked me again. On the way to his house, he asked me what I do for a living. I told him that I'm a paralegal, and he asked for my number because he was trying to sue the state of California and a detective who was now retired. I gave him my number and then asked him about his potential case. He then proceeded to tell me that he had been in jail in the 70s for a false R-word allegation, and that the detective working on the case really had it out for him. I was shocked, but working in the legal field, it's not uncommon for me to see these types of situations. When we got to his house, his wife was waiting outside. She was also elderly. She thanked me for giving her husband a ride and seemed excited to have someone there. I had gotten out of the car to get his bike out of my trunk, so she asked me if she could show me their front yard leading all the way up to their backyard. She said her and her husband worked on their home for many years. She seemed very proud of her home. I told them that I had to leave, but that it was nice to see them. She insisted. I let them show me around, and when we got to the backyard, they opened the back sliding door and asked if I wanted to come in for some orange juice. I kindly declined. I suddenly got a very weird feeling, but I brushed it off. They told me I could come in and set my purse down if I wanted to. My purse is a crossbody bag, so I hadn't even realized that I still had it on. Anyway, they insist for me to come in. Mind you, they're super elderly, so I did. They began to show me their wedding photos on the walls. As they're walking through the home, the elderly man shows me all the doors, and the doors all have these crazy type of contraptions. And he says, "Look, so nobody can break out." Mind you, he said break out, not break in. At this point, my gut was screaming at me to get out. He then said, "Come right this way. I want to show you how we converted this room." My fight or flight response kicked in, and I don't know how I figured it out, but I was able to undo the contraptions from the front door and broke out of there. I ran to my car that was sitting in the driveway and drove away as fast as I could. I went the opposite direction from where my house was, but all I cared about was to get as far away as possible, fast. When I got home, I was shaken. I got several phone calls from him and voicemails asking why I had left so suddenly and if I was okay. I blocked his number and called my cousin to tell her what had happened. Was I almost kidnapped? They were extremely old, but maybe someone else was in the house. Maybe someone much younger and stronger. Something just didn't feel right. There isn't much to this story, but I absolutely stand by my gut instinct that this guy was up to no good. Early 90s as a 10/11-year-old, I didn't have any friends or much of a social life. So that summer I basically rode my bike a lot, hung out at parks, and went for walks in the woods to fill up my summer days. There was a creek and some pretty deep woods where I saw a number of kinda creepy things. And there had been rumors going on about the area that it was quite dangerous. To get there, you had to go off the main roads of the suburban town, past the country club, past the one-floor business complex that isolated semi-wooded houses, past the old abandoned paper mill, past everything, and eventually down dirt paths into the woods. It's kinda isolated for the area. Not many people around at that point. One hot summer day, I'm out riding my bike, and I do my thing and hang out at the creek, and then start heading back for lunch. I get my bicycle back to an area that has sidewalk, and at just the right spot to not be seen. I slammed into a small log that was just the right size to throw me hard off my bicycle, My bike wheel was dented. I was scratched up pretty bad, but nothing was broken. Immediately, I mean just seconds later, a small pickup truck slowly pulls up. Nice guy starts asking things and says that I saw you fall off your bike, etc. Hey kid, you want a ride? Put it in the back, etc. I immediately thought, nope, this guy ain't right. Something about it set off a gentle alarm in my head. There wasn't anything specific other than the timing, and I didn't like that it was a truck. I wasn't panicked or anything. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I just instinctively didn't want this dude's help. So I said no thanks, and then I ignored him and anything else he said. I didn't give him the time of day, and he drove off. I didn't tell anyone. I thought later, years later, that the entire thing was weird. The log wasn't there when I went by the same piece of sidewalk a couple of hours earlier. There's no way it fell from a tree. It wasn't a branch, it was bigger than that. It was definitely dragged to the exact spot in a dip that I wouldn't see until too late. And then there's this guy with a truck saying put the bike in the back, I'll give you a ride nanoseconds later. And there's absolutely no other traffic. I didn't give it a lot of thought until years later. At the time, I was just bothered enough to set off my spider sense. In retrospect, years later, I know that that guy was suspect. This happened a few months ago, and I haven't been able to make any sense of it. Perhaps someone here can offer an explanation or some insight. I woke up one morning around 3 or 4 a.m. to a peculiar sound coming from my living room. At first I assumed it was my father snoring, but as I became more fully awake, I realized how little sense this made, as my father was no longer living with me at this point. So naturally I got pretty freaked out as I laid there in bed, wondering what this noise could be. The more I listened, the less it sounded like snoring and breathing. It's difficult to describe, but the sound I was hearing was vaguely mechanical and reminded me of the sound a record makes when the needle has reached the end of its looping. But that isn't really an accurate description either. It was a loop of strange, atonal noises. Once I finally summoned the courage to go investigate, I quickly discovered that I was indeed alone in my apartment. The sound was coming from my cell phone, which I had plugged in to charge and left on a table in the living room. It was an unnamed audio recording, several minutes long. I was too afraid and confused to care enough to figure the mystery out right then. So I simply shut the phone off and returned to bed. I was thoroughly creeped out by this when I started thinking about it the following day. And it's not just the unexplained recording playing inexplicably at 3 or 4 in the morning. It's that you have to manually select an audio file to play it. And I have no history of sleepwalking or anything like that, so that rules me out. I might still have the recording, but I'll have to check once I return home. I have no recollection of recording that though. I tend to use that feature often, as I record ideas for songs on my phone whenever I have something that I like. And I always name those files. That wasn't anything even vaguely musical. Just strange noise. Thoughts? Last night, around 5 a.m., I was asleep. I heard a lot of the dogs in the neighborhood, including mine, barking. I tried to ignore them because they do that sometimes. They bark for anything and everything. A couple of seconds later, I think I hear what sounds like people yelling. At least 2 different people. I'm still half asleep, so at first, I'm thinking it's a bunch of teenagers just being rowdy and annoying. I used to do stuff like that. But then I'm starting to understand what they're saying. It sounds more like arguing. I'm starting to wake up. I grab my phone and call the police. I'm on the phone with dispatch and hear what sounds like a woman screaming bloody murder. I've never heard anyone scream in such agony. I then hear a man's voice go, "Oh God. Oh F. Oh God." The dispatch tells me that the other people have called the police, so they're on their way. It sounds like the people are right in my yard. My mom is awake at this point and comes to my room asking if I hear it too. We finally get the courage to look out the window. It's just one woman. She's standing right under the streetlight near our yard and screaming. At points, she makes her voice deeper and kind of sounds like a man, but it's just her. Her hair is tangled, and she's wearing only shorts and a tank top in January. The police pull up 2 minutes later, and they try patting her down. Every time they go to pat her down, she grabs her pockets. Eventually, they just arrest her. I know she probably just wasn't all there or high, but it was scary. I've never seen someone acting like that, and I've never heard someone in such agony. I don't know what was wrong with her or what happened to her after that, but I keep thinking about it. I don't know if I'm being paranoid, but I think someone has been watching my family at night. I'll try to be as brief as possible and stick to the relevant events that are giving me this feeling. But the latest event happened last night and I didn't get much sleep. So apologies if I ramble or if I'm unclear. My wife and I recently purchased our first home after the birth of our daughter. Everything was as you would expect the first few months. Painting, decorating, renovating, basking in our newfound slice of the American dream. You get the idea. Unusual things started happening several months ago. One day, as I was getting home after work, I passed by a strange truck 2 or 3 houses down from ours. I say strange for a few reasons. We know literally everyone in our small neighborhood, but I'd never seen this truck or person before. There's no reason for through traffic to come down our street, and the truck was driving very slowly. Like, put it in drive but don't press on the gas slowly. As I pulled in the driveway, the truck flipped a U-turn and came back towards my house. Getting out of my car, the truck crawled by, and the driver stared daggers at me as he passed, then sped off. I don't like to judge based on appearances, and I like to think that I don't scare easily. But something about this guy's eyes gave me a bad feeling. Obviously, this was weird. I mentioned what happened to my wife, telling her we should be more mindful about security, and I told her the type of truck. And she said, "That same truck drove by and the guy stared at me when I got home this afternoon. I thought he was just being creepy and checking me out." I tried to tease her a bit to lighten the mood, calling her cocky for assuming any guy driving by was checking her out. I didn't want to freak her out, but I was definitely freaked out. We saw the truck a few more times over the next couple of weeks, either driving by slowly or parked down the block and facing our yard. But one day the truck stopped driving by, and we haven't seen it since. I sort of dismissed the whole thing as me being paranoid. Then other things started happening. In the past month or so, my wife and I have been hearing tapping on the windows at the front of our house at night. It's happened 2 or 3 times to each of us separately, always around 10 or 11 p.m., and always a soft but distinct tap, tap, tap. It sounds like knocking with a single knuckle on the metal part of our screen door, if that makes sense. The first time that my wife and I heard the tapping together was last weekend. We were in the front room playing with our daughter around 9:30, just about to settle her down for bed. Our front room has a large, almost floor-to-ceiling window running the length of the wall next to the front door, which faces the street. We were all sitting on the floor with our backs to the window, reading our daughter a book when we heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Now, our house is older. Creaks and cracks are not uncommon, but this sound was so distinctly intentional that my wife and I immediately looked at each other and bolted up out of the room. I had my wife and daughter lock themselves in a back room while I turned on all the lights and did a sweep around the outside of the house. Of course, I didn't see anything and was ready to dismiss the whole thing as more paranoia over something that probably had an innocent explanation. Until last night. Around 9:45, we heard our daughter making noise in the baby monitor. I waited a few minutes to see if she would settle down, but when it became clear she wouldn't, I got up to put her back to sleep. The layout of the room is important to visualize this next part. This room is on the side of our house, but the exterior wall juts out a bit in an L shape, and the corner of this L is made up of windows. If you're standing in the door to the room, you're directly across from these windows in one corner, and there's a rocking chair in the other corner pointed towards the front of the house. One window faces the street and the other faces our neighbor's house. A garden bed planted with small shrubs wraps around the outside of the house directly underneath. I was sitting in the chair getting my daughter settled down. I had a lamp on so the room was softly lit. Once she fell asleep, I stood up to put her in her crib when something caught my eye. There was a figure standing about a foot away from the window, in the bare space between the shrubs and the house. They were staring at us. I didn't look long enough to see anything more than what appeared to be a man in a light gray hoodie standing a few feet away on the other side of the glass. Sprinting from the room, I brought my daughter back to my wife and I's bedroom, leaving her there while telling my understandably confused wife to lock the door. After turning off all the lights in the house and turning on all the lights outside, I began moving from room to room, peering out the windows into the darkness. I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Whoever it was must have taken off after seeing me notice them and make a quick exit. Obviously, I had some trouble sleeping after this. I spent hours checking security cameras and going from room to room looking out windows into the night, hoping, but also not hoping that I would see anything that could explain what happened. This morning I went outside to the spot where the figure would have been standing. I thought, hoped, maybe there was a plant or something that I mistook for a person. When I got to the spot, I realized the figure had to be standing exactly in a bare patch of ground, about 2 feet in diameter, directly in front of that window. Part of me is still hoping that I'm being paranoid. The mind can play tricks on you in the dark, seeing things that aren't there, especially when you're a sleep-deprived new parent. But with everything that's been happening, I can't shake the feeling that there was actually someone out there last night, watching us. Please let me be wrong. Update. Didn't really expect my post to blow up like this, but I really appreciate all the advice and support from everyone. I tried to respond to as many comments as I could, but at this point there are so many that I figured I would just provide a quick update and address some of the more common points people have brought up. As for the update, nothing happened last night. I expected that would be the case for a couple of reasons. First, so far all of these events have taken place a week or two apart. The tapping this weekend and seeing the figure 2 nights ago were the closest in time of any of them. Second, the person absolutely realized that I saw them, so I wouldn't expect them to be so bold as to come back the very next night. I still stayed up and kept an eye out though. To address some of the common questions, comments, and advice, we own several guns. I am well versed in gun safety, and a pretty good shot if I'm going to brag on myself. Since we have a young child, I've kept all the guns locked away, but after this past week, I've made sure to find places to store guns that are out of her reach but within my reach for quick access. There are blinds, curtains, and solar screens on all our windows. The window in the story is dark, and the curtains were drawn over it that night. They're also semi-see-through white ones, so I didn't notice that the blinds weren't drawn. All windows are checked and covered as soon as I get home from now on. All our exterior doors are deadbolted and the frames are reinforced. These were security measures put in by the previous owners that I thought were unnecessary, but I'm now grateful for. Anyone tries to kick their way in, the door will hold long enough for me to get ready for them. I have purchased and installed additional exterior cameras with motion-activated lights. I'm looking into buying additional motion-activated floodlights for the more remote corners of our property. Lots of people have mentioned getting a dog. While I love dogs, we have a pretty full house animal-wise right now, and I wouldn't feel good about taking in another animal that I wasn't sure we could give sufficient attention to. Our neighbors have 2 very alert dogs that are out all night, and they have been barking more often after dark the past few weeks, which is another reason we've been on edge. As for who this person might be, I don't think it's related to the previous owners. They were a married couple with no children who lived there for over 30 years. The husband died and the wife needed to downsize, which is why she sold the house. Maybe it's someone who lost out on their bid for the place. But there was so much time in between us buying the house and all this starting that it seems unlikely. Several people made note that I said I was a lawyer and asked if it could be related to that. My practice is focused on probate and estate planning, and the vast majority of my cases and clients do not involve any contentious issues or drama. Obviously, there have been some cases that get heated, but I can't think of anyone that would want to come after me specifically based on any of them. I took some pictures of the place where the person would have been standing and the view that they would have had inside the house. It got me spooked all over again for sure. If I make a separate update post in the future, I'll consider including them. Thanks to everyone for taking the time to read and provide advice. If anything, I feel much more prepared to keep my family safe should this person come back. If anything happens, I'll update with a separate post in the future. Just so it happens, the OP did update with a separate post, and now we are going to read that one. Update. I don't know if I'm being paranoid, but I think someone has been watching my family at night. Not much has happened really, but I've gotten several comments asking for an update, so I thought I would fill everyone in and what's going on over the past week. So I'll start with the obligatory. I didn't expect my post to blow up like it did, but thanks to everyone for the outpouring of comments and support. I tried to respond to everyone as much as possible, and if I didn't respond to you specifically, just know that I read what you said and I appreciate you. So for the update, following the advice of everyone here, I installed several new exterior and interior cameras equipped with motion-activated lights. Doors and windows are locked down, guns are at the ready, all that good stuff. Talking to the neighbors, cops, etc. yielded the results I expected. Nobody saw anything. Everybody said that they would keep an eye out. Call us if they come back. Cool. Over the last week and a half or so since I saw the figure in my daughter's window, nothing else has happened at the house. No tapping, no strange men lurking in the shadows, nothing. I've developed a habit of checking various neighborhood forums /apps whatever you call them, scrolling through posts about people stealing Amazon packages to see if anything similar happened to someone nearby. This morning, one post caught my attention immediately. Someone who lives about 1.5 miles away posted doorbell footage of a man who the homeowner said attempted to break into their house last night. The man first knocked on the door before trying to kick in a window and break through the front door. Police arrived after the man had left and said he was probably homeless and they were unable to locate him. The man in the footage looked exactly like the figure I saw last week. White guy about 5'10", slim build and wearing a gray or off-white hoodie and matching sweatpants. Obviously, that's not the most specific description, and it could apply to tons of people in any city. Probably applies to some of you reading this right now. But I remember thinking that the light-colored hoodie and sweatpants were such a weird clothing choice for someone creeping around at night. The only reason I noticed the guy was because of the contrast between his light clothing and the shadows around him. Add the fact that his attempted break-in happened at a house so close to ours, a week later, by a person who looked so similar to the guy that I saw. Maybe it's a coincidence, but maybe I wasn't being paranoid after all. This happened a while ago when I turned 16. was super sheltered. Like, still haven't seen Pirates of the Caribbean because it's gory, but you get the idea. Only Christian media allowed and enforced, including music, movies, TV shows, other people, clothing, etc. So this was like the first time I had been out of the house. My mom took me on a trip to Seattle by train for my 16th birthday, and I was ecstatic. We got coffee and waited at the station for the train to pull in when a woman came to stand next to us. She started a conversation with my mom and I at some point. She told me, "You know, you really look like a Sarah." Not my actual name, but go with it. I was naive, so I was thinking, wow, she's good. What a coincidence. But she later straight up asked if it was my birthday. I said yes it was, and she gave me a smile and said something along the lines of, "Well, Sarah, I hope your day is filled with light, and your life will fill with beautiful and interesting things. God bless you." Not exactly that, but that's as close as I can get to verbatim. I was giddy and thanked her energetically. When I heard the train come in behind us, my mom and I turned to see the train, and when it stopped, we looked back to the woman and she was gone. This was an open platform surrounded by busy streets, and we couldn't see her anywhere. She was long gone by the time the doors even started opening. I remember my mom pointing out that she knew my name and guessed my birthday, so maybe she was an angel. Should I be freaked out more than I am? She was a really pretty black woman with her hair done up and wrapped in a scarf. I think she matched my height, but she was very sweet and I don't remember feeling unnerved at all by her presence. I detected zero creep vibes, but there's also no way that she could have known me with how sheltered I was. I never knew anyone my parents didn't meet first, so what the hell? She's right though, lots of interesting things in my life. I don't know. What do you guys think? I bumped into an old friend who kind of made me remember this. But in our class, I had a friend who used to be really good friends with me. We didn't live far apart, and we both lived in the same country on a farm, maybe 7 miles down the road from each other. Now mind you, this town ain't got more than 20 to 35 people living there at a time. We was the same age, so naturally we hung out a lot. We stopped being friends 8th grade year, and he kind of set to himself. Within a 2-week time span, his grandfather died, his brother was killed, and his other friend from a different country who I think was his cousin trying to hang himself. Well, his brother was 3 to 4 years older than us. He was murdered, and his face was bashed in. Badly. Body burnt up. So basically, it was a closed casket funeral. I remember going to the funeral with one of my other friends that lived out in the country with us who was the same age. We were sitting at the funeral, and I remember 2 of his older brothers, friends, was beside me. Both of them crying, and one of them made the comment, "I hope they find the MFer who did this and hang him." And the other friend said, "Yeah, I hope they finish him off quickly." Weeks go by, and turns out the guy who said yeah was the murderer. I don't remember the full gist of the story, but what I heard was he got hooked on meth. And basically, he was using more than he could afford. He was in debt to a dealer who was known to be on the extreme side to his buyers. Well, the guy apparently asked my friend's brother for money, and he wouldn't give him any, or didn't have any to give. And they were in an abandoned trailer that they hung out at. He grabbed a fire extinguisher and bashed him until he died. Took anything off of him that was worth any value, and took his driver's license. And I guess he set the place ablaze trying to cover his tracks. But after those weeks, his little brother and I really stopped hanging out. I held on to that for the remainder of high school and didn't talk to anybody. I became really antisocial. But yeah, I sat beside the guy during the entire funeral service. Second row, far to the left, looking at the casket. So I wonder how true the statistic is that we will walk by 36 murderers in our lifetime. I found this subreddit and had to share this experience. First, I want to say that I've had a couple of weird/paranormal things happen in my early childhood, but I can only barely remember them. This experience, though, really made me believe in somewhat of an afterlife. So when I was a sophomore in high school, my neighbor would take me to school early in the morning because I didn't have my license. We usually left the house at around 6:50 to 7 a.m., and we live in eastern Pennsylvania. So around winter, it's pitch black early mornings, not to mention freezing cold. One day, my ride had to go into school early to take one of his teachers, so we left my house around 6:20 a.m. I remember it being complete dark during November and taking the normal back roads to school. To put into perspective, these roads are through the woods, with a guardrail on the right. Past this guardrail is an easy 20-foot drop to straight creek water, so there's really no possible way to get up there other than from the other side of the road. While driving my ride, and I noticed an old woman with a complete white dress staring downwards, just standing right next to the guardrail. It was like out of a horror movie. It's complete darkness and maybe 20 degrees out. My friend and I were so confused and creeped out. Fast forward a couple months down the road, I'm driving with a friend, Luke, and his father. He was taking us back from a party one night, and while we're on the road, his dad tells me his story of seeing a ghost on this road when he was a young kid. He explained in depth exactly what I saw maybe 30 years ago. I get chills while typing this, as it's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. This took place over 2 years ago. One day, me and my friend decided to explore this big field that had mainly factories and even some houses built around it. All of it is now empty. We headed for one of the abandoned factories, but stopped midway because I saw a bunker. Looking inside, it was very dark and appeared to be deep. I knew one of us had to go first in there. I ended up being unlucky and took the lead. Climbing down, I turned on my flashlight and it revealed a small hallway. It was old and none of the entrances had a door. Looking at the place, I felt something very wrong, like the gut feeling you get when you're in a life-threatening situation. Not moments after, I heard footsteps. They got quicker and more aggressive by each second. I ran up into the exit, with my friend already finding a way out. I got even more panicked and slipped. I looked behind me. It appeared as a man with black leather clothing fully covering his body and not showing any skin. His face was wrapped with an old black Soviet gas mask. I briefly glanced at this guy as I regained my balance and ran as fast as I could. When I finally got outside, I looked back at the bunker and he was gone. My practical, in-charge self continually denied what was happening. My base instincts knew that we were prey from the moment this guy saw us. In spite of this, I'm not sure that I would have taken action if I didn't feel that my children were in jeopardy. pretty sad to say that I wouldn't bother an employee for just me. My husband is an executive and frequently travels out of the country. As much as I avoided going shopping at night, it was a necessity at times. Sometimes you find out you need poster board and glitter for a project due the next day. It happens. We have 2 boys who were ages 6 and 10 at the time. It was the dead of winter in the Midwest, so pitch black outside by 6. I went to one of the big stores that is frequently associated with strange people and deviant behavior. Mom of the Year. I pulled into the parking lot and was delighted to find the first spot next to handicap open. I felt seriously lucky until I pulled into the spot. I immediately noticed that there was a van to my left, which was backed into the space. In my head, I heard the voice of my mom saying, "Never park next to a van, as someone can open this big sliding door, grab you, and be gone in moments." Although I dismissed this as nonsense, I still took note that there was a middle-aged man sitting in the driver's seat. It concerned me enough to tell my kids not to dilly-dally when they got out of the car. I didn't want to be standing there with the door open while they looked for their shoes, toys, etc. I got out, and the man was less than a foot away from my youngest son, and as I was getting him out of his booster seat, I could feel the man staring at us. And when I looked up to smile at him, he was looking right through us. It just felt off. We got into the store without a problem. I grabbed a cart and stuck the youngest in it. My older boy was a few paces ahead and said, "Mom, I'm gonna get some Axe body wash," and peels off to go down the aisle. Before I can stop him, I see that the guy from the van is now in front of us and has turned back and is walking towards my son. I have no idea how this happened as I look back several times in the parking lot and did not see him get out of his van. The man then notices that I am right behind my son, turns, and continues to walk ahead. I'm concerned at this point, but not scared. I continue shopping and eventually notice that this guy is in every aisle as us. He's covertly looking at us, seems to be fake shopping, has nothing in his hands, and does not have a cart. In retrospect, it took time to put all of these facts together. It was as if I knew before my brain did. I decided to leave the grocery aisle to test if he would continue to follow us to more obscure parts of the store. Magazine aisle? He's looking at a book. I'm looking at laundry baskets, and suddenly he's there examining hangers. You get the point. I headed to the checkout and was concerned that I could no longer see him, and I looked for him too. There was no way that I could safely return to the car at this point. I asked 2 male employees if they could walk us to the car. One said, "Sure, what's going on?" I explained that a man had been following us, and that I knew he was parked next to us. He then said, "Is he bald and wearing a leather jacket?" When I said that he was, the man responded that another lady had just left with her kids, and said that he followed her around. Now I knew that I wasn't being hysterical and started sobbing. They walked us to the car and the van was still there. The employee walked to the back of the van, and I thought made note of his license plate. I called a friend who worked for the local police department. As luck would have it, she came across the street at a sporting event with her daughter. She marched into the store, found the 2 employees, and asked them to show her the van. It was gone. The employee had not written down the license plate because the guy in question walked out with a woman. As if there aren't plenty of women who do unspeakable things themselves or help their men to do so. The police took a report and reviewed the store surveillance tapes. The guy was indeed following us and the other woman around the store. They were not able to find him without the license plate. I trust my instincts implicitly now. So this happened last night. It was around 1 a.m. and I was walking from my work to a bus stop half a mile away. I do this pretty regularly and it's a decent-ish area. and this particular bus route drops me closer to my house than the one my work is right on. No problems usually. But last night as I was walking, an SUV pulled up about 10 feet in front of me, and after maybe 20 seconds turned their lights off. Kind of concerning because it's not the most common area to park given positioning of the houses and such, but okay. But then I noticed the man in the car is staring right at me as I walk closer. I've had this happen before during the daytime, and at that distance the man even turned his whole head to stare at me as I passed. It was creepy, but I didn't feel complete fear and alarm bells in my head like I did last night. I thought about just walking past the car and going on my way, but I couldn't do it. Thought even of this very subreddit, how it's better to look stupid to some strangers than end up dead. So I took my phone out and started playing music out loud on a pretty high volume, turned my flashlight on and started sprinting, just looking straight ahead. I don't know why I decided on the flashlight and music, but whatever. So yeah, as soon as I did that, the car peeled off pretty quickly. I ran most of the way to the bus stop and didn't really chill out until I was home. Always stay alert while walking at night, y'all. When I, 26-year-old male, was 13, I was visiting my grandparents' farm during the summer in the rural United States. To kill time, I would spend the afternoon fishing alone on a riverbank about 3 miles away, and would ATV there. This location also happened to be near a seldom-used campsite. Where I fished, there is a long, steep boat ramp and dock. Think about 150 feet long, sloping down to the water, surrounded by steep, eroded banks with tall grass and weeds, making anyone below the top of the boat ramp invisible to campers. While I was fishing, a car drove over the top of the boat ramp and parked down below me. A guy in his 60s got out and walked over to me. He asked me what I was fishing for, what I was using as bait, and where I lived. I don't remember all of the conversation, but I started getting creeped out when he eventually offered bait that he hadn't used in his car. I declined. After a bit, he said that he was a part-time photographer for a fishing magazine and wanted to take my picture for it. Although I was creeped out, I obliged to just see if he would leave soon. He snapped a couple of me with my pole and a fish that I had caught. After what felt like too long, he started to leave, but then asked for an address to send the magazine with my photos in it. Really feeling weirded out, I gave a fake address with my house number and road name changed. Looking back, I think that I may have been in considerable danger. This happened a few years ago, but I sometimes still think about her. I, about 20 years old at the time, am earning my wage through college by performing in cabaret shows in semi-big cities. My parents help out from time to time, but it is enough to buy groceries and pay bills. Also, I don't really have a filter in what I tell people, just in case you're wondering why I told the woman anything at all. I was on my way to the train station, to then take the train a few towns over for one such cabaret show, and in a bus station at the time. I was listening to music on my phone and had my earphones in. When the bus stopped at my station, there was a middle-aged woman, I'd say maybe in her mid-50s, immediately at the door outside to get in, and I felt her looking at me. Okay, it happens. I have a clothing style that is unique enough to earn me looks from time to time. When the bus door opened, I got out, and the woman turned with me, tapping my shoulder. Let's call her Leslie, since she told me her name, but I forgot everything except for that it started with an L. The conversation is not word for word, but paraphrased. She said, "Excuse me." Yes, I took my earplugs out. I just wanted to say, you have such a unique style and it really stands out. I love it. You look like you're really attractive. She was seemingly really genuine, and I was pretty happy about the compliment. I didn't really think about the fact that Leslie was about to get into the bus, but then didn't, as she was talking to me now. I replied, "Oh, that's so sweet, thank you. And yes, I earn my wage from doing a form of cabaret, so you're kind of right." Leslie, "Oh, that's so interesting. Gotta keep an eye out for posters here in town then." Me, "Yes, I'm on stage here quite often. In 2 months at this location, for example. Also tonight, but it's not here in town. It's in a different town." Leslie, "Oh, sounds like you're about to have a great evening." Me, "Yes, I am. The people there are wonderful." Leslie, "Then I'm coming with you." Now hold on. Wasn't she just on the way to somewhere? This was also when I realized that she didn't get onto the bus that I got out of, and that this bus had already driven off. Me, "Weren't you about to go somewhere?" Leslie, "Yes, to my friend's birthday, but I'll cancel. This sounds way more fun." Now hold on. She had someplace to be, and just randomly decided to cancel her plans and come with me onto the train with a person less than half her age and drive 3 towns over, where, by the way, there was no way for her to come home afterwards. I had a place to sleep there for the night, but she wouldn't have. Me, "You won't be able to come here afterwards. There's no train that late at night. I have a place to sleep." She was speechless. She looked as if she started thinking, and I thought that she changed her mind for a second, but then she smiled again. "Oh, it's fine. I have a son living there." I don't exactly know what she said there anymore, but I know that it was something to the effect that I immediately thought she was lying. At this point, I was weirded out immensely, but still not freaking out. I started walking off since I had to get a subway still. Leslie took this as a sign of me agreeing and came with me. I know she was talking the whole way to the subway, and that she was walking pretty slowly. I didn't have to rush to the station. I was pretty early, in fact, wanting to grab dinner on the way, which I mentally wrote off at this point. But the way she held me back was by linking arms with me and holding on tight. I was freaking out at this point, but trying my hardest to stay calm. Whenever I was asked a question about myself, I was lying now. In my head, I was making plans to say I wanted to grab lunch, sitting her down at McDonald's and making a break for it. But Leslie beat me to an opportunity to bail. Sitting at the subway station, there was a pretty well-known homeless person of our town. We had never talked, but I knew his face, and he's always been polite. Leslie apparently did know him, and got distracted immediately, letting go of my arm. Leslie, "Oh, hi, John. How are you? Doing good?" John, "Hi. Doing my best, but stuff is crappy at the moment." Leslie, "Oh, you always say that. It's like I always tell you. You gotta..." I didn't stay around to hear the conversation and started jogging, then running inside the train station. I didn't want to stop for dinner anymore, afraid that Leslie would find me again, so I immediately ran inside the train. It would be driving off in 15 minutes, which freaked me out even more, since she would have plenty of time to get inside still. So I did what I thought was best and hid in the train toilet until it drove off. Then, and only then, I got out and sat down. I had to change trains once, and felt watched the entire time. But Leslie was gone. She did not appear in Town B, and at the cabaret show. I told the story to a colleague and called my best friend, who both helped me to calm down. I never saw Leslie again, and today, I think she might just have been lonely or confused. But I don't care to find out. For reference, I'm a 16-year-old male. I have kind of long-ish red dyed hair and wear eyeliner and was wearing all black denim at the time. I got off the bus and parted ways with my friend and made for the bus station to go home. After I stood in the queue, it was super long, I got tapped on the shoulder and I turned and it was this mid to late 20s mixed race guy. I took my earphones out because he started talking to me thinking he was asking directions or something. He proceeded to tell me I was cute and tell me that when he saw me, he sprinted after me. His tone sounded off. I'm not exactly sure what it was about it, but it was like he was obvious as to how creepy he was. He then asked to exchange various social medias, to which I said I had none. He also asked my name and if I was from around there, to which I gave false answers for both, and said I only came there rarely to see a friend. He asked me how old I was, to which I replied 16, hoping it would make him back off. It didn't. He asked me if I was single, to which I replied no. He then assumed I had a boyfriend, to which I said I had a girlfriend, to put across that I don't swing that way. He kept following me up the line, and the only reason I kept talking to him was because I did not want to turn my back on him. I mean it when I say that there was something badly off about him, in public area or not. I didn't want to end up getting touched or hurt or anything. I'd rather shoot the crap and come across as friendly to avoid him maybe getting aggressive than to elevate the situation. Fortunately, as I was about to get on the bus back home, he walked away. Maybe he thought it would make a scene if he tried getting on with me. Maybe he caught somebody watching. Or maybe he caught on that he was being a creep. I don't know. But I'm just so glad that he didn't try to get on the bus with me. The last thing I wanted was him knowing where I went around. If he confessed to sprinting up after me, I wouldn't put it past him to do the same when I got off the bus. Hypothetically, if he did manage to get on with me. I don't know where to post this, but here we go. So to begin, this happened roughly 8 years ago. I was hanging out with my friends for one of our other friends' birthdays. We went out for a stroll to our local dock to wait for our weed guy. We were all 16 to 17 years old. This is important because we were not under the influence at this time. When we arrived at the dock, we hung out for a bit, talking and waiting for our weed guy. My buddy gets a text from him saying to meet him in a different spot because he was held up at another place. The rest of my friends agreed to walk there, whereas I was an overweight kid and lazy. I didn't want to walk 1.5 miles to pick the smoke up, so I elected to stay at the docks because they planned on returning to smoke by the lake. Fast forward about 10 minutes after they left. I'm sitting on a bench, looking out over the water, when I look to the right down the length of the lake to see a white orb floating maybe 150 feet over the lake. I immediately got this gut feeling of being extremely uncomfortable looking at this white orb, and begun to walk back to where my friends were supposed to go. I made it to the train tracks that headed out of the dock area when I heard, "Hey," my name. I turned around to see 4 figures that I couldn't make out, walking out behind one of the boats on the shore, waving. This was how many of my friends were with me before they left. The next thing I know, I'm completely turned around from the direction I was heading out of the dock area. I hear sounds coming from the fence line to my right, which it was my friends yelling my name and asking where I was. Not to mention that between the time of seeing the figures walk out from behind the boat to hearing my friends, about 40 minutes had passed. And I don't know what happened to that lost time, even to this day. Tell me your thoughts. Last night I woke up from a nightmare. It was maybe midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. I remember just laying there, drifting to sleep, when I swore I heard light knocking outside my door. I keep my door closed, and I heard my dad saying, "Are you awake?" It was in a stern voice. I had no idea what was going on. I knew my parents were asleep at this time since it was the middle of the night. But when I think back to it, I remember similar stories of people seeing or hearing their family's voices, only to find that they weren't there, or it wasn't actually them. I'm glad that I keep my door closed as a habit, because I know dang well that wasn't my dad talking to me. Maybe this is true, or maybe I imagined it. I don't know, but I was on edge for a while. So the other night/morning, I encountered something that still has me scratching my head. The time was 3:13 a.m. Pacific Standard Time in the northwestern state of Oregon. As I was walking back home through the city of Portland, I noticed a church that had been put up for lease. I've always liked the design of this church, so I decided to walk through its courtyard. As I approached the church, I began to suddenly get an uneasy vibe. I counteract this by turning my headlamp on and continue walking into the courtyard. As I'm walking through, I suddenly hear a scurry to my right. Quickly looking towards the sound, I spot a person dressed in all black on their knees, making what can best be described as a nest. A circular bed made out of cardboard and newspaper. But that's not what was weird. Like I said, I had previously switched on my headlamp for comfort, so when I looked towards the figure, my light caught his eyes. Now, I've always been told that human beings do not have the type of lens that covers their eyes that causes light to reflect back to you. So if that be the case, then please tell me, why did his eyes glow like that? Practically the same as a deer in headlights. Let's start this out by saying I've seen things. All the time I do. It's not uncommon, and most of the time I shrug it off. I have GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. I feel emotions a lot heavier than other people do, who don't have it. I mean, I cry for no reason, get angry at nothing, and even laugh at a speck of dust. I overthink every detail out of my day. Many times. However, one big thing that goes along with this is that my mind never shuts off. I hear voices that aren't there and so on. I see figures who my brain pretends exist. So that's why I often, as I said before, shrug it off. However, this time was different. Very different. It was a few weeks ago. I was home alone. My parents were at work and I didn't have work, so I just crashed there after school. This isn't uncommon. I do it often. I'm a female and only 18, so I do what any smart gal would do, locked all the doors, because people are crazy. I got a call from my parents saying that they were gonna go to the bar for a while. Fine by me, meant I could read a book and enjoy the peace and quiet for longer. It was around 7 o'clock. And was dark outside. The moon gave the yard some light. I read my book for an hour. Now, it being 8:25, I checked my phone to see if I had any messages, so this time I knew precisely. I heard a sound from the kitchen. My head snapped over, thinking my parents had gotten home. I didn't hear them enter, but again, I was lost in my book. Hello? No one. Odd. Okay. It's just my brain playing tricks. I do have a strange mind. But no, There it was again. It was a drawn-out noise. I couldn't make it out. It gave me goosebumps. But again, my mind plays tricks. I should just go check it out to calm my nerves. I walked to the kitchen and stopped, dead in my tracks. 2 of the drawers were open. They shouldn't be. I haven't eaten yet, so I have not even walked into the kitchen. So why were the spoons and forks and knives open? Mom, you here? It was fear. I was getting scared. I felt a panic attack coming. It just wasn't right. I like things being perfect. It helps calm me down. So when it isn't, I get iffy. I took deep breaths and closed the drawers. Could have been me forgetting things. The wood being loose and causing them to slide out. Then I heard a knock on the door. Okay, good. My parents are home. They'll understand. They always do. I go back to the living room and go to unlock the door, but it was already unlocked. I let my hand just hover there. I locked that door. I knew I locked that door. I checked it 3 times, peeked at it 5 times just to make sure it was locked. I heard a knock again. It shook me out of my slight panic. Sorry, I called to them and opened the door. No one. There was no one out there. I looked around outside. Their car wasn't there. I quickly closed and locked the door again, stepping back. Okay, so this isn't my strange mind. That door was locked. I knew I heard a knock. Panic. I was having a panic attack. It didn't take much to make me have one. I ran into my room and closed my door. I stayed there until my parents got home, and admittedly, I slept on their floor that night. Nothing else has happened since I opened the door. But again, I haven't stayed home alone. I took more shifts at work and refused to be there without someone. Was it my GAD? Was it my mind? Was it something else? Has anyone else ever had a similar experience? In April 2019, I was an exchange student in South America. I went on a trip to the Amazon with a group of other exchange students. While many strange things happened, I want to focus on 2 that were particularly relevant to this sub and unsettling. At the time, I was 18 years old, tall, thin and white with blue eyes. Mentioned just because I always stood out as a tourist. I was fluent in Spanish, allowing me to talk to locals without misunderstandings. The first incident occurred on our first night/morning in the Colombian/Brazilian town of Leticia. We were all staying in a hotel. It had a strange vibe and I didn't feel comfortable, neither did my friends. The hotel staff were staring at us like creeps, which made it even more scary. During breakfast, I overheard other exchange students discussing a missing phone. I offered to help locate it using my Find My iPhone app, and we were able to track it down to a sketchy part of town. The police accompanied us to the location, and we found the house where the phone was. The family denied involvement, but their behavior and the fact that the phone signal was coming from their place made it clear to us that they had probably stolen it. They came out with knives and machetes, yelling and staring at us. It was intense. I felt a shiver down my spine, and I had a very strong gut feeling that we needed to leave. We told the police to go back and not do anything about the phone, because we were worried about our safety and the phone wasn't worth it. When we went back to the hotel, the police wanted to see if there were any cameras pointed at the door of the room from outside or the inside. The scary part is that they had cameras from the inside and outside. Only these 2 cameras were mysteriously turned off for 2 hours that night. I also know about another incident and found out why the cameras were turned off by someone from the hotel staff. I don't feel comfortable sharing that though, as it involved one of my friends. It was very serious and some legal actions were taken. One of our other stops was in a small village in Peru's part of the Amazon. I don't remember the town's name, but it had around 150 people. The village was built on pillars above the water as the river Amazon was overflowing or something. We had arrived and settled in at the local hotel. We were taken to a stage where we were introduced to the region's indigenous dances, songs, and culture. After the performance, the group returned to the hotel, but I decided to stay back and talk to some of the locals. I wanted to see an anaconda. Very dumb and touristy, I know. Someone had told me that this was a good time to see them hunt. I started talking to a local guy, and he claimed he couldn't show me where to see a live anaconda, but offered to show me a picture of one that he had taken a few days ago on his phone. Despite what my parents always taught me about going to strangers' houses, I foolishly decided to follow him to his remote, isolated home deeper in the jungle. As we walked, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease and danger lurking around every corner. When we arrived, he instructed me to wait in the living room while he searched for his phone. But as I stood in the dimly lit room, my gut told me that something was wrong. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was in grave danger. After what felt like an eternity, he returned and said that he couldn't find his phone. He asked me to come back the next day, but I knew I had to get out of there as soon as possible. I thanked him and left, but my heart was pounding with fear and adrenaline. When I returned to the hotel and told my friends what had happened, they were horrified and couldn't believe I had put myself in such a dangerous situation. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something terrible could have happened if I had stayed any longer. Looking back, I realized that the encounter was bizarre, even if he was just truly a kind person. But I can't shake off the feeling that something could have happened to me. It scares me to think about how gullible I was. Even though I consider myself rational and sometimes even paranoid, I didn't listen to my instincts and put myself in danger. This all happened 15 minutes ago, and I'm freaked out, but hopefully we'll do an okay job recapping what just happened. At my apartment building, it is all street parking. Tonight, as I was pulling in and parked, I noticed there was this man walking the opposite direction from me. But then we made eye contact and he immediately turned around and walked in my direction. At first I thought it was strange, but then he started crossing the street and was making a beeline for me. He wasn't saying anything at all, so I don't think he wanted money or directions, but it still freaked me out. So I frantically tried grabbing my keys back out of my purse and peeled out of there. What freaked me out though, was that he was close enough to getting to my car at that point that I made crystal clear eye contact and he looked pissed. So I drive off and circle around. I do not see the guy anywhere but decide to circle around again and look super carefully. Once again, looking all around the sidewalks and side street, and he is not walking around. I start getting out of my car and see this guy coming out of an area where there's a bunch of bushes, where I guess he had been hiding, and he again beelines for me. All this time I have actually been on the phone with a really good friend of mine, who at that point says he'll drive over. He luckily lives 10 minutes from me. Said friend looks around and walks me to my apartment, where I am inside now and safe. But seriously, what the hell was all that about? He didn't say anything threatening to me, so I don't think I can call 911. But I do think I'll try the non-emergency number when I calm down. Stay safe out there, folks. On June 3rd, 2016, I had a social media event. I was an Instagram influencer, and the event was a golf tournament. I posted on social to ask followers to come, so when he showed up, it didn't surprise me. Sure, the tickets were about $250, but for some reason that didn't click with me. It was a drinking event as well, and he showed up at least tipsy, but having a good time. He was also an Instagram model who I knew online. He asked me out on a date after the tournament. I was a single mom, and because of the event, my parents were watching the kid until the next day. I said sure. We went off on the date, went to a bar and grabbed food. The man was handsome, but mostly charming as heck. We had a beer, and then in his car he offered some weed. I rarely smoke, but decided what the heck. We hotboxed, then went off to a bar. He was friendly with everyone and made me laugh quite a few times. Then went off to the liquor store for more alcohol and finally to his house. I was drunk and high, so it was easy to sleep with me. He had a bunk bed, and I remember him being on top and being very selfish and aggressive and being scared. I didn't stop him out of fear. He had driven, and my car was still at the golf tournament location, and we were far too far for me to afford an Uber back to my car. The next morning, I went to the restroom, and afterward noticed a long pipe coming from the toilet after I flushed. He came out upset, because it was to water the weed him and his roommate were growing. I didn't know, or I was too drunk and high still to click. I apologized deeply and was scared. We came downstairs and I looked at the walls and decor for the first time. Knives and weapons were used as decoration all over the house. I waited for him to have breakfast and drive me back to my car, trying not to show panic. In the car, I knew I needed an excuse that wouldn't hurt his feelings. I told him that I had a blast, and I'm so bummed because I really like him, but my child's father passed away when he was 1. True. And I can't have CPS take him away because I'm around someone growing weed. I told him I didn't care about the weed and didn't want him to change, so it was a bummer. I let him make out with me one last time as he dropped me off. I was shaking as I drove off because of the vibes. The very next day after he dropped me off, he met a girl that was 10 years our junior and an 18-year-old mini-me. He dated her for 3 weeks. She dumped him, and he stalked her like crazy. So much so that he was arrested a few times. In September of the same year, he gets out of jail the last time and heads to a bar, meets a girl there and takes her home. He ends up murdering her, chopping up her body, cutting her heart out, and setting it on fire. He's currently serving life for his crime, and I get flashbacks all the time. I have a toddler. She's a giggling bundle of cuteness that needs no sleep. Her father took her out to see an elderly family friend, and they were wandering around the shops together. She was holding friend's hand quite happily when another woman walks up, grabs her hand, and walks off with her. Elderly friend shouted. Husband grabbed her back. I'm so relieved my husband wasn't in the toilet or looking an aisle over when it happened, as our friend wouldn't have been able to chase and keep up due to her limited mobility. The police in the shop were informed, and I am not okay. So this is a bizarre experience I've been confused about for some time and wanted to share. I also wondered if anyone could shed some light on what might have been going on. In September 2018, I, a 23-year-old female, was visiting San Francisco and walking through Fisherman's Wharf. It was super busy. There were a lot of people and I was just passing the entrance to Pier 39 when a man dressed entirely in black stepped out a few feet ahead and started walking directly towards me. I didn't think much of it at first until another man appeared out of nowhere to the side of him, and both seemed about to corner me. A really weird thing was that both men were wearing latex gloves. Obviously, I was like, WTF, turned around and walked straight off in the opposite direction. It was weird, but I didn't give it much more than a thought. Fast forward a week later, I just returned to San Francisco from a trip and was once again around Pier 39 with a couple of girls I had met out there. And at this particular moment, we had just spotted another couple of people from our group. It's difficult to explain, but at the exact moment we agreed the other guys we knew, another person appeared directly beside me, wrapped an arm around my friend and I, and said, "Hey, let's get a selfie," while snapping a picture of us on his phone. I noticed the phone was angled so that only my friend and I were in the photo, not him. I quickly covered my face, but they got a complete picture of my friend's face. When I turned around to look at the person, it was one of the guys who had tried to stop me a week earlier, again dressed in all black. To be honest, I was completely freaked out by this experience. And after we got some dinner in the area, I told my friends we'd have to take an Uber back to the hostel rather than walking, even though it was a short distance, because I had a really bad feeling about that encounter. I'd wanted to call the police actually, but no one else seemed to understand why I was so concerned. To this day, I do wonder, did we narrowly avoid being trafficked? I can't think what else would have been going on, but thankfully, nothing else came of it. Thank you so much to listening to the end of this video, and a special shout out to our channel members, Martha APS, Michelle Copland, Ginger Beer, True to You Presets, Inner Scare Wifey, Emily Tippins, Adam Wagner, Miss Janet 64, Derek Slink, Helga Andres, Michael Smith, Burberry's Fables, Samantha Scotton, Glenda's Voiceover Projects, Maxine Gentile, Sad Fish, Inner Scare Wifey Simp, Pilot, Vanita Tillman, Sarah Rodriguez, Shane Wilson, Sarah Wood, Jacob Ryumi, Claire, Sherry Uchel, Zane Loggins, Hail Mary, Carrie Morris, Crystal, Jado, Chili MC, Snowing Wine Drops, Tina Mead, Taylor Ruist, Casey Brown, Caroline Hawksworth, Eric Donter, The Grim Reaper's Nightmare, Tangela Young, Miss Cannabis, Anon Q, Mathematica, Christy Goodall, Skincrawler, Ruby Wilson, Jennifer Moyer, Modern Sonic the Hedgehog, Cappy Karma, and Paul Reese. Thank you all so much for being members, and thank you to everyone who watched to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the extra rain at the end. Good night, everybody.